Blood is thicker than water. That is the lie they fed you to keep you trapped. For years, you've wondered why the people who raised you seemed terrified of your success. You thought there was something wrong with you. But Niccolo Machiavelli and evolutionary biology both reveal a much darker reality. Your family's sabotage isn't personal. It's a biological imperative called systemic homeostasis, a survival mechanism where the tribe subconsciously crushes anyone who threatens to outgrow them. So your family operates as the most dangerous intelligence agency in your life, and because they share your blood, they feel entitled to your destruction. There are 7 specific things you must never reveal to them. Share the wrong detail, and you hand them the exact blade they'll use to dissect your life. You know the cognitive dissonance, that jarring moment when you realize your parents or siblings actively resent your growth. They operate with a crab mentality, a pulling you back the moment you try to climb out of the bucket. It feels like a vicious betrayal, but in evolutionary terms, it's just resource guarding. Kin competition dictates that your autonomy is perceived as a critical loss of resources or utility to the tribe. Machiavelli understood this brutal reality of proximity, power, and betrayal. He knew those closest to you pose the greatest threat because they have the deepest access. But what happens to your body when you try to survive a biological system built to systematically suppress you? You're not just emotionally drained, and your exhaustion isn't some kind of personal weakness. That heavy, dragging fatigue you feel after a supposedly normal family dinner? It's not merely in your head. Your body is physically breaking down. When you spend years as the designated problem child, the black sheep, or the one who simply never fits into their narrative, you aren't just experiencing standard emotional drama. You're undergoing what clinical researchers officially call family scapegoating abuse. And here's the thing that will completely shift your perspective. This abuse actively triggers clinically significant autonomic dysregulation. Your central nervous system is literally being rewired to exist in a state of constant, unbearable threat. When your parents or siblings demand your presence at these toxic gatherings, they aren't asking for your love. They are demanding that you return to your designated role as the system's emotional regulator. Your suffering stabilizes their dysfunction. And when you sit there, absorbing their passive aggression, your body absorbs the impact, the sudden dizziness, the heart palpitations, the overwhelming urge to sleep for 3 days straight. That is the physical footprint of scapegoating. It is your body screaming at you that you are fundamentally unsafe. Let's look at the actual raw data. Victims of family scapegoating experience something called orthostatic hypotension at an absolutely alarming rate. We're talking about an odds ratio of 9.19. That means you're practically 10 times more likely to have your nervous system completely fail to regulate your blood pressure correctly, simply because of ongoing, inescapable familial stress. Your body is physically buckling under the immense weight of their psychological projections. And the chronic scapegoating physically damages your autonomic nervous system. The exhaustion you feel isn't just a mood, it is a severe physiological crash. But society refuses to let you protect yourself. And this is the real, insidious villain of the story. We're all subjected to a societal indoctrination that constantly preaches that family is absolutely everything. And we're surrounded by a modern therapy culture that actively demands you continuously expose your soft underbelly to the exact people who hold the knives. They prioritize polite, photogenic reconciliation over your actual, literal survival. Modern therapy tells you that if you just communicate a little bit better, if you set the right boundaries, if you use your statements, everything will suddenly be fine. But this cultural obsession with reconciliation is a trap. It demands that victims continuously present themselves to their abusers under the guise of healing. It treats toxic enmeshment like a misunderstanding that can be talked out over coffee. It completely ignores that you're dealing with a biologically antagonistic force. They want you to stay in the burning building and try to reason with the fire. You're being told to heal in the exact environment that's actively making you sick. Your cortisol levels stay constantly spiked, Your immune system is compromised, and every time you try to play the good son or the good daughter, your biology pays the ultimate price. So, what happens when you follow conventional advice and attempt to heal with the exact people who broke you? You try to find closure. You sit down for what you think will be a healing conversation. You attempt to explain your boundaries to deaf ears, desperately hoping for an empathetic realization. You expose your vulnerabilities, thinking they'll finally see your pain. But here's what actually happens. You don't get closure. You simply provide the toxic system with brand new psychological ammunition. They take your deepest insecurities, the ones you just handed over in the name of healing, and they weaponize them. You think you're building a bridge, but you're just giving them the blueprints to your fortress. You see, toxic family systems don't operate on logic or fairness, and they operate on emotional blackmail and manufactured chaos. Every single piece of information you give them is logged, categorized, and stored for future use. When you go to them seeking validation, you are essentially going to the hardware store for a gallon of milk. It isn't there, and it never will be. And it gets worse when you bring your personal relationships into the mix. You vent to your family about your partner. You tell yourself you just need a sounding board. You just need some support after an argument. But you're not just venting. You're actively dismantling your marriage and handing over massive operational leverage. Clinical studies show this exact triangulation is one of the highest statistical predictors of divorce, with a 0.41 correlation. When you complain about your spouse to your bloodline, your family will hold that grudge long after you've forgiven your partner. They'll use that information to subtly drive a wedge, isolating you completely. Before you tell yourself, "But my family just needs to understand my trauma," look at the clinical data. Recent studies confirm that family scapegoating abuse isn't just an emotional drama. It actively triggers autonomic dysregulation. Your body physically breaks down when you try to heal with the people who broke you. Modern therapy tells you to communicate. Machiavelli tells you to survive. Pattern recognition is your greatest weapon here. Well, you have to realize that diplomacy with a system designed to exploit you is simply delayed subjugation. Every time you engage, every time you try to play the observant courtier, you lose ground. You're trying to play a rational game of chess with a pigeon that's just knocking over the pieces. The clinical reality is that they do not want to understand your trauma. They want to maintain their position in the hierarchy. When you stay and try to navigate this toxic ecosystem from the inside, your mind and body deteriorate. You become trapped in a false solutions loop. You try the newest communication technique. It fails. You blame yourself. You try harder. Your nervous system stays locked in fight or flight. You keep waiting for the magical moment of reconciliation that is mathematically never going to arrive. Because acknowledging your truth would require them to face their own guilt, and systemic homeostasis will never allow that. Yet the family structure will protect its own self-image at the absolute cost of your sanity. So you have to stop handing them the weapons. You have to stop explaining yourself. You have to stop playing the diplomat in a court that has already sentenced you to clinical exhaustion. You're burning your own biological capital to keep them warm. And the cost isn't just emotional anymore. It's written right into your nervous system. If emotional communication destroys your nervous system, how do they weaponize your financial success against you? It's critical to remember that evolutionary biology dictates their behavior. Your family will try to stop you from outgrowing the enclosure. It's not personal. It's a primitive reflex to keep the tribe intact, even if the tribe is deeply dysfunctional. When you start succeeding, you threaten the established order. So, you have to initiate the paradigm shift. You have to start hiding the hidden treasury. If you reveal your financial success to a toxic family, you enter what researchers call the economic outpatient care trap. Let me hit you with some hard economic data. 80% of American millionaires received zero economic outpatient care from their families. Absolutely zero. The data shows that recipients of this kind of financial enmeshment consume more, invest less, and lose all motivational drive. It mathematically guarantees that neither party builds true wealth. Think about the sheer audacity of the enmeshed family structure. They demand absolute transparency from you, but they operate entirely in the shadows. They want to know exactly how much you make, where you invest it, and what your assets are. Strictly so, they can measure how much of an obligation you owe them. This isn't just about them wanting a loan they'll never pay back. It is about them ensuring you never gain enough altitude to fly out of their reach. A financial independence is the ultimate threat to systemic homeostasis, because if you don't need their money and they can't drain yours, they lose all operational control over your existence. When you hide your capital from your family, you aren't being greedy. You're making a mathematically necessary move for mutual survival. Financial secrecy transforms into an act of objective, tough love, rather than guilt-inducing selfishness. If they know you have money, they'll manufacture crises. And the guilt trips will escalate. The subtle demands will begin. And if you refuse, you become the villain of their narrative all over again. By keeping your financial reality a complete secret, you remove the target from your own back. You protect them from their own worst instincts, and you protect your future from their sabotage. This is the Machiavellian philosophy perfectly locked into place. You build a transition bridge between past regrets and future manipulations. Because once you lock away the graveyard of your past, your vision clears. You'll suddenly see exactly how they're trying to manipulate your future. You'll realize that every guilt trip about money, every sudden emergency, was never about the money at all. It was about control. It was about pulling you back into the enclosure. Why is your own blood biologically wired to sabotage you? Because your success highlights their stagnation. Your wealth highlights their poverty, not just financially, but emotionally and psychologically. They cannot drag themselves up to your level, so systemic homeostasis requires them to drag you back down to theirs. You have to completely restructure your concept of loyalty. True high-level intelligence requires you to view your capital not as something to be shared with a destructive bloodline, but as the exact vehicle for your escape. You're not a bank for a system that abused you. You're the architect of a new lineage. But to build that new lineage, you have to be willing to make cuts that society deems utterly unforgivable. You cannot play the observant courtier without sacrificing your biology and your capital. Staying in the orbit of a toxic family, even if you are entirely detached, still drains your resources. It still keeps your nervous system on a constant razor's edge. It still leaves a back door open for their chaos to infiltrate your life, which leads to the final, fatal mistake you can make. If you cannot play the observant courtier without sacrificing your biology and your capital, what is the final Machiavellian move? You have to abandon polite diplomacy. Polite diplomacy is only for those who are trapped, for those who actually have the resources and the psychological strength to escape. Diplomacy is a fatal hesitation. The ultimate strategic pivot is what we call the Medici ghost ship. You simply vanish completely. Historically, one of the most brilliant rulers understood that you cannot negotiate with a faction that fundamentally desires your destruction. You cannot heal a diseased limb by reasoning with it. Sometimes, you have to completely excise the toxic elements to ensure the survival of the state. Your state is your mind, your marriage, and your trajectory. You have to strategically sever the final cords of emotional, financial, and physical connection. When you finally decide to walk away, do not expect a dramatic cinematic moment where they suddenly realize they were wrong. There will be no final confrontation where they break down and apologize for years of abuse. If you wait for that, you will be waiting until you are in the grave. The Medici ghost ship strategy requires you to accept that you will be the villain in their story, no matter what you do. So, embrace the villain role. Let them think you are cold. Let them think you are heartless. Let them have their comfortable delusions while you go out and claim your freedom. Their opinion of you is none of your business anymore. Your only business is preserving your vitality and your sanity. Yes, there is grief. You have to acknowledge the grief of the family you wish you had. You mourn the parents who should have protected you and the siblings who should have cheered for you. You feel that loss deeply. And then you burn the ships. You do not leave a forwarding address. You do not leave an emergency contact number. You reject the conclusion that you have to take the high road and continue to love them from afar. You are protecting your neurological health, your marriage, and your financial trajectory from a biologically antagonistic force. Choosing your mental stability over a bloodline is the highest form of sovereignty. It's not cruel, it's the ultimate sovereign flex. It's the absolute highest level of self-preservation. And you're taking back the power that they tried to siphon from you since you were a child. Society will try to shame you. The flying monkeys will tell you that you're making a massive mistake. They'll weaponize the concept of forgiveness. But remember the clinical data. Remember the autonomic dysregulation. Remember that their version of love requires your complete subjugation. The true Machiavellian does not try to rule a burning kingdom, and they don't stay around trying to fix people who are committed to misunderstanding them. They build a new kingdom in secret, surrounded by a chosen family that actively wants them to succeed. They understand that true power lies in the ability to walk away and never look back. Society will demand that you remember blood is thicker than water. Machiavelli demands that you remember blood is also what attracts the sharks. Survive, vanish,